Ну, можемо, да, вже починати? Готовий переклад?
Так, готовий. Починайте, прошу. Так, так. Good morning, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. The Center for Crimea of the National Strategy, jointly with the Ukrainian Press Media Center, are carrying out the press conference, which is dedicated to the situation in the occupied Crimea. At present, we are going to discuss pleasant things, which are actually important for everybody, because everybody likes to have nice food and nice drink, and we are going to talk about the situation with restaurant business and the catering system and public catering system in the Crimea, which has evolved there. And we believe that the things which are going to happen there are not going to be real pleasant. That's why we decided to call this press conference, well, there is no appetite. And the restaurant business is leaving the Crimea. Thank you. And the expert of the Free Crimea, Ostapchuk, is taking part in our press conference, and I am Berezovets, and we expect Mr. Sergei Usovsky to join us, the representative of Samopomichin Kiev State in the Kiev Council, and he is expecting the results of voting, and he just called us and apologized for not being able to join us, because he says that at present the mass rigging of the election takes place today during the calculation of the votes, and he has to go to the Central Electoral Committee today, and he asked to excuse him from this press conference. So we are going to carry out this press conference together, two of us. And now we would like to offer you some slides, and you can see the number of the catering institutions in the Crimea, and officially there were 6.5 thousand of those before the annexation of the Crimea happened. And you know the specific features of the catering system in the Crimea. There were just little cafes, which we call cheburechnas, and none of them were registered. We are talking now only about those which have been registered, because a lot of those which existed there have not been registered. But after the Russian occupants came, we can see that the number of the officially registered catering institutions has decreased by the factor of three, and now there are 4.5 thousand of those there. But Mr. Shiglov said that 6.5 thousand catering institutions existing in the Crimea was just the official number, those which were registered, but 2,000 entrepreneurs have left the system. And actually, we have to divide 4.5 by 2, and then we can come up with 2.5 thousand catering institutions which survived in this sector in the Crimea. What are the key issues? And we would like to be quite frank and open with you, and the Russian specialists also acknowledge that, and the registrar of Russia also accept that, and they say that carrying out the business in this sector is much worse in the Crimea than in Ukraine. The people who live in the Crimea and those who understand the problem, they know that all the waiters and cooks were invited to the Crimea from other parts of Ukraine, because the residents of the Crimea did not want to work for low wages, and also there was no system of training of these specialists, same as in the hotel business. And approximately 70% of the staff of the hotels and the catering business were the people who came from the mainland, from Ukraine. And unfortunately, we have to say that this practice is being implemented up to the present. The main part of the staff of the hotel business and the catering system business are Ukrainians who are under 30 and who come from the mainland of Ukraine and come and work in the Crimea. Previously, they did not have to get any work permits to work there. But now they have to apply to the Federal Immigration Service to get these work permits. And this is a big problem because after the annexation, there was an outflow of the qualified specialists from the Crimea, and the major part of the hotels and the catering establishments lost their staff and personnel. And even the Prime Minister of the Crimea, self-announced Prime Minister of the Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, even applied to the government of the Russian Federation, and he said that in the Crimea, always the Ukrainians were the most part of the stuff in the catering business and the hotel business. And the Russians don't want to go to the Crimea to work there because it's considered that it is not a very high-yielding profit sector of the economy of the Crimea. And also, Aksionov applied to Dmitry Medvedev, the Prime Minister of Russia, with a request to simplify the procedure for the Ukrainian citizens to get a permit to work in the hotel business and catering business during the summer season. And this was partially resolved, and it is not because they love Ukrainians, but simply they wanted to simplify the permit issuance. And at present, half of this stuff are Ukrainians at present who are residing in the mainland part of the Ukraine. As far as the other issues which come up in carrying out the catering business in Ukraine, you know that all the chains, the so-called restaurant chains, left the Crimea. And in March 2014, the McDonald's closed their business there, and they were the first to do it because they had the restaurants in 3 Crimean cities, in Simferopol, Sevastopol, and Yalta. And these restaurants were closed, and all the personnel was relocated to the mainland Ukraine. And actually, we applied to the management to the biggest networks of the restaurants, including McDonald's and Kozyrna Karta, with the request to join this press conference, but they refused, and due to the apprehension of the issues which are related to the ownership, which have not been regulated yet, because McDonald's and some other representatives of big networks actually are being bought. The facilities are being bought by them. Real estate is being bought by them. And at present, the issues of ownership are not regulated yet. Maybe you've seen that in Yalta, one of the big restaurants still is branded as McDonald's, and my friends from the Crimea sent me a photo, and they said that at one of these semi-legal catering institutions, they use the brand of the McDonald's, and they have just stolen this logo from McDonald's. They have repainted it from yellow to red, and they have put it upside down, and it is being used. So actually, I've looked at this photo, and it is absolutely obvious that it has been stolen, and it has been fixed to a small catering kiosk in the embankment of Yalta. And all these restaurants of the Kozyrna Karta chain and the McDonald's have not been sold. The real estate has not been sold, and at present they are not operating in the Crimea. The second problem is too high prices, and we are going to discuss that issue a little bit later, and non-qualified, low-qualified personnel, and so, and the staff who comes to work for the season are those who come from the mainland Ukraine. 50% of those come from mainland Ukraine. Yevgen Shiglov, the head of the Association of Restaurants of Crimea, he says that this is a policy of Ukraine. Well, and they say that if we set up 100 restaurants with good cuisine, that will mean that the market will be saturated. Another problem which come up after the sanctions were enforced on Russia, and I talk about it firsthand, because a lot of the so-called sanctions goods have not been available in the Crimea, and the restaurants who were offering Italian and French cuisine had to just close because they could not get the pasta, the sauces, and the cheeses. And Russia is not the country which can manufacture very high quality foodstuff. And it is difficult to substitute the Italian pasta with the macaroni which have been made in Voronezh. So they had to first substitute the Italian food with the Russian products, and when they understood that the clients are not willing to visit these restaurants, so these restaurants also had to suspend their activities in the Crimea. Now I would like to give the floor to Roman Ostapchuk, and that is another unpleasant aspect, and these are the prices, and we have quoting these prices from the official sources, and
Taras, you can also quote the vice premier. Oh yeah, Magomed Kostoy said he also heads the Association of Restaurateurs of Crimea. He says that people cannot calculate their risks, they cannot calculate the profit, income, the revenue, the profit rate. They do not know how to compose a menu, how many dishes there should be, what is the salary of a waiter. There's not a single training center in Russia where such specialists could be trained. And that said the vice president of the Association of Restaurateurs of Crimea. I will tell you about the prices in Crimean restaurants. These are taken from open sources, calculated in hryvnia according to commercial rate of exchange, and I should tell you that the prices were taken before the blockade of Crimea, so we can add something like 30% to this. We took 3 kinds of restaurants, bistro, cafes and restaurants. An average lunch in Russian rubles in bistro is about 150-190 hryvnia. A sandwich would cost 75 to 111 rubles. That's 29 to 43 hryvnia, and a cup of coffee will cost up to 77 rubles, and that's 22 to 30 hryvnia. As far as cafes are concerned, an average lunch in a modern Crimean cafe would cost from 295 to 491 Russian rubles, which is 130 to 180 hryvnia. At a restaurant, lunch would cost you 883 to 1530 rubles per one person, which amounts to as high as 586 hryvnia. And in a dinner at a restaurant with alcohol will cost up to 2,737 rubles, which amounts to 1,049 hryvnia. Before the blockade of Crimea, these prices were higher than Moscow or St. Petersburg, which are the biggest cities in Russia. For instance, a salmon dish would cost you 30% more than in Russia. And we know that 70% of foodstuff in Crimea is imported. And of course, if we take a European or an Oriental cuisine, then 100% of foodstuff there is imported. That's why we have such prices. Well, you know that there are some very well-known restaurants who had to leave for the continental Ukraine, like Musafir from Bakhchisarай. They opened in Ukrainian cities, and Crimean Tatar cuisine restaurants become very popular now. For instance, Krim restaurant at the Maidan of at the Independence Square, Musafir in Saksahansky Street, Sofra, very well-known small cafe which is situated in Podil, in Nizhny Val Street, and a lot of such restaurants open in Lviv. There's quite a lot of IDPs, Crimean Tatars including, who were made to leave the peninsula. As far as the situation with prices is concerned, why such high prices? You know, traditionally, the cities and places where there is a lot of fish at restaurants, like Sicily in Italy or some others, fresh fish accounts for most of the menu, but in Crimea the prices went higher because a lot of fishing industry was destroyed, as Ukrainian sailors and fishers had to re-register according to Russian laws, and they had to get new licenses. This means that until the end of 2014 they were continuing to fish. However, now they make them to install very expensive equipment for small cutters and boats, which makes fishing absolutely unprofitable. You have to pay something like $20,000 to equip one single sailing fishing boat, which means up to 1 million rubles, taking into account the exchange rate. So it is understood that not very many fishermen can afford such equipment, and this actually ruined the Crimean fishing industry, because this was very beneficial for Russian fishermen from Krasnodar territory, for instance, who entered the market aggressively, and they are now buying Ukrainian fishing boats. And this will continue because, you know, and the after effects will be very sore, because you can destroy something very quickly, as they did, but restoration will take a lot of time when Crimea returns to Ukraine. The trend over 2014, according to Crimean state statistics, of opening new restaurants, catering establishments, on average only 10 catering establishments opened every month, and this is a very low figure for a recreation area, recreation region, and the trend is such that they worked for a maximum year. This is not a long-running business, as people worked during the tourist season and then closed down as there were no clients anymore. Now your questions, please raise your hands. I'll come to you and give you the mic. Hello, the first Crimean Tatar TV channel ATR. There's been more than a month that a citizens' blockade of Crimea has been lost, and how it can influence the restaurant business in Crimea, the catering business in Crimea. Look, we can say about the prices for foods. Since the blockade started, on average, the prices for foods in food stores in Crimea have risen from 20 to 30% on average, and this is the official statistics from the so-called government of Crimea. And of course, when they buy foodstuffs for restaurants, there's usually double pricing. So in restaurants, this would lead to raising prices by 40, 50%, and of course now there's not a tourist season and there's some inertia, and the prices are not going to rise immediately, but eventually they will rise. For instance, on average the prices have so far, in comparison to August, have risen by 10 to 15%. This is not official statistics, that's what people can tell you, how much it used to cost in a restaurant then and now. Well, in spite even of the blockade of Crimea, the continental part of Ukraine remains the biggest exporter of foods to Crimea, and they get to Crimea, these commodities and goods, but through Russia. That's why they are even priced even more. Union Information Agency, do you forecast that the number of catering enterprises in Crimea will fall next year, and by how many? And you say that 10 new establishments per month is too small a figure. What would be a satisfactory, a proper figure? Yes, we forecast further closing down of catering business in Crimea. You see that according to statistics, they have 4,500 such establishments, but they say that it should be decreased twofold. So the numbers have fallen by almost 3 times since the annexation of Crimea, and the minimum number of establishments will of course remain there, but before the next summer, I think, we will see that out of 2,300 catering businesses that work now, in reality they will probably have something like 1,200. We do not have statistics as to how many catering businesses opened every month when Ukraine was there, but again I tell you, 10 establishments per month does not mean that they all are significantly sized restaurants. This may be just a kiosk which sells fast food. But on average, well, first of all, you should take into account the specifics of the tourist resort recreation area. And they used to open in every May. We don't have statistics across Ukraine, but every month in Kiev, at least 30 such businesses open, and the number of population in Crimea and Kiev are approximately the same. And here you should note, of course, that first they work seasonally, and they do not work more than a year. The business is not successful. People invest a lot of money to start their business, to launch their business, but they cannot fight what is there in Crimea now, and they just closed down their business and in such a way increase the number of unemployed in Crimea. Can you tell us how high is the demand for restaurants and bars in Crimea now? Well, look, of course they have a very complicated registration procedures. Even sanitary and epidemiology procedures are very, very complicated what concerns the import of the foodstuffs. But what is the problem? Why the businesses are closed? And in brief, the Russian tourists who come to Crimea, and of course there was quite a sufficient number there this year, but these are so-called budget tourists. They arrive in a centralized fashion. They just live in their sanatoria and the resort houses and pensionates, and they do not even go anywhere to eat out. They eat on the territory of the establishment where they live. This is the special feature of the Russian tourist business. You know, there's a lot of videos on the net where local people complain that Russian tourists do not go and they do not buy fast food, for instance, shawarma, because the Russian culture of recreation is the so-called Egyptian culture. If they live in a hotel, they actually do not go anywhere. They look at Crimea through the prism of the so-called all-inclusive. They do not spend any additional money when they arrive. Well, they do not provide official statistics, but I know that the average rate of taken seats in restaurants is something like 20%, and sometimes it rises to 50%, but there's no well, probably in some institutions of premium segment where embezzlers and abusers of power live, they enjoy some business, but not anywhere else. Well, thank you for your questions. I think that the topic today was very interesting, and I think that at least it has provoked your appetite and your interest. The more so that it's 11 o'clock now, and according to European standards, it's brunch time now. And in contrast to Crimea, I think we are convinced that in Kiev there are no serious business problems with catering businesses. So we round up our press conference. Thank you for your participation, and we'll meet you in a week's time in this very crisis media center.